नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवत्योत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी. So we're reading from Canto 5, Chapter 20, and we'll read from verse 43 to 46. But we'll recite this verse. Andamadya gata suryo Dvau abhumyor yadantaram Suryanda golayor madhye Kotaya syu panchavimshatihi Andamadya gata suryo Dvau abhumayor yadantaram Suryanda golayor madhye Kotaya syu panchavimshatihi Andamadya gata suryo Dvau abhumyor yadantaram Suryanda golayor madhye Kotaya syu panchavimshatihi
Andamadya gata suryo
Vyava bhumyor yadantaram Suryanda golayor madhye Kotaya syu panchavimshatihi
Andamadya gata suryo Abhumyor yadantaram
Vyava bhumyor yadantaram Suryanda golayor madhye Kotaya syu panchavimshatihi Andamadya gata suryo Vyava bhumyor yadantaram Suryanda golayor madhye Kotaya syu panchavimshatihi. Word to word meanings. Anda Madhya Gata, situated in the center of the universe. Surya, the sun globe. Dhyau Abhumyo, the two planetary systems. Bhuloka and Bhuvarloka. Yat, which. Antaram, in between. Surya, of the sun. Anda Golayo, and the globe of the universe. Madhya, in the middle. Kotaya, groups of 10 million. Syu, are. Panchavimshatihi, 25. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The sun is situated vertically in the middle of the universe, in the area between Bhuloka and Bhuvarloka, which is called Antariksha, outer space. The distance between the sun and the circumference of the universe is 25 koti yojanas, 2 billion miles. Purport. The word koti means 10 million, and a yojana is 8 miles. The diameter of the universe is 50 koti yojanas, 4 billion miles. Therefore, since the sun is in the middle of the universe, the distance between the sun and the edge of the universe is calculated to be 25 koti yojanas, 2 billion miles. We'll read the next verse. The sun god is also known as Vairaja, the total material body for all living entities. Because he entered this dull egg of the universe at the time of the creation, he is also called Martanda. He is also known as Hiranyagarbha because he received his material body from Hiranyagarbha, Lord Brahma. Purport. The post of Lord Brahma is meant for very highly elevated spiritually advanced living beings. When such living beings are unavailable, Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, expands himself as Lord Brahma. This takes place very rarely. Consequently, there are two kinds of Brahmas. Sometimes Brahma is an ordinary living entity, and at other times, Brahma is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Brahma spoken of here is an ordinary living being. Whether Brahma is the Supreme Personality of Godhead or an ordinary living being, he is known as Vairaj Brahma and Hiranyagarbha Brahma. Therefore, the sun god is also accepted as Vairaj Brahma. Next verse. O king, the sun god and the sun planet divide all the directions of the universe. It is only because of the presence of the sun that we can understand what the sky, the higher planets, this world, and the lower planets are. It is also only because of the sun that we can understand which places are for material enjoyment, which are for liberation, which are hellish and subterranean. And last verse. All living entities, including demigods, human beings, animals, birds, insects, reptiles, creepers, and trees, depend upon the heat and light given by the sun god from the sun planet. Furthermore, it is because of the sun's presence that all living entities can see. And therefore, he is called Drig Ishwara, the personality of Godhead presiding over sight. Purport. In this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Surya Atma Atmat Veno Pashya. The actual life and soul of all living entities within this universe is the sun. He is therefore Upasaya, worshipable. We worship the sun god by chanting the Gayatri mantra. Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi. Surya is the life and soul of this universe. And there are innumerable universes for which a sun god is the life and soul. Just as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the life and soul of the entire creation. We have information that Vairaja, Hiranyagarbha, entered the great dull material globe called the sun. This indicates that the theory held by so-called scientists that no one lives there is wrong. Bhagavad Gita also says that Krishna first instructed Bhagavad Gita to the sun god. Imam vivasvate yogam proktavahan aham ape. Therefore, the sun is not vacant. It is inhabited by living entities, and the predominating deity is Vairaja for Vivasvan. The difference between the sun and the earth is that the sun is a fiery planet, but everyone there has a suitable body and can live there without difficulty. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahiyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavancha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Shah Namo Vishnu Padaya Abhishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashat Deshatarine Vancha Kalpataro Vaishya Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratushe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripatam Ham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam. Hare Krishna. We're discussing from this chapter, which is talking about the structure of the universe. And it explains, we were discussing yesterday about, or as Prabhuji was telling about the Loka Lok mountain. That how there is that mountain, and inside that mountain is the Loka, or the place where inhabitants can reside. And outside that mountain is Aloka, where no one can reside, or where the place, entire tract of land is made of gold, but it is not fit for inhabitation. And we also discussed that how beyond that is the covering, or is the shell of the universe that is there. And how we elaborated on that past time, how Krishna and Arjuna, when the Brahmana's son were again and again being stolen, then they go through that, or they cross through that shell of the universe and go into the abode of Mahavishnu. So here now some description about the sun is mentioned. Or here it's mentioned that where is the sun exactly located and what is its position, or what is the function of the sun. So the first verse talks about that the sun is located in the middle of the universe. So we know there are 14 planetary systems that are there. And here it's located between the area that is between Bhuloka and Bhuvarloka. Between those, this is what it's mentioned in this verse, which is called as Antariksha, or the outer space. So exactly in the middle of that, the sun is located. And that's why the distance that is given to the circumference of the universe. So again, we can connect with the thing we discussed yesterday. That shell of the universe, or the under that is there, inside which all the planets, everything is placed, all the lokas are there. So sun is located right in the center of that. And here it's mentioned distance between the sun and the circumference of the universe is 2 billion miles. So you can directly understand the entire diameter will be 4 billion miles, and this is exactly in the center, just like the radius. So this is about the position of the sun. And then the next verse talks about what are the activities or what it does. So here it's mentioned, or here in the next verse, that is 44th word, another name for the sun is given as Martanda. So the meaning is explained. Martanda means Anda is the globe that is there. And Martha comes from the word myth, or dead. So it's described that the sun is the first, or the sun god. Basically, sun god is the first creature to enter the universe or enter the planet. And that time the planet is unconscious, or it's not in a living condition. And that's why the name is given Martanda, as it's explained in the translation, because he entered this dull egg of the universe at the time of creation. So when the creation happened, but no activity had happened yet, the sun god is the first personality who entered that creation or entered that universe. And that's why another name to him is given as Martanda. And two more names are given, that is Hiranyagarbha and Vairaj, which are nothing but the names of Lord Brahma. Because Garbha, we understand the meaning of the Garbha is the womb, or the Anda we are talking about. And Hiranya is a golden covering, or the golden egg. So generally these names are used for Brahma, because he is the first personality in the universe, or he is the one who gives the living entities their bodies, who does the secondary creation. We discussed this previously, that how when Lord Vishnu glances over the universe and he impregnates the universe with all the living entities, then it's Brahma's job to give the body to the living entities. Or Brahma is the living, Brahma is that personality who gives them the body according to their desires. Brahma is also not independent here. Based on the past desires of the living entities, based on the past karma of the living entities, Brahma gives them bodies corresponding. And that's why these names are mentioned for Brahma. And here the same names are used for sun god also. What are the two names? One is Vairaja, means the total material body of all living entities, which is actually a name of Brahma because he gives the material bodies. And here, because sun god also comes from Brahma, or sun god is also an emanation from Brahma, even sun god is simultaneously given the name of Vairaj Brahma or Hiranyagarbha Brahma. Because as Prabhupada explains, he is also known as Hiranyagarbha because he receives his material body from Hiranyagarbha. Because ultimately everyone the first living entity is Brahma, and he is the one who creates all other living entities. And sun god is one of the powerful entities that is there, so he is also called non-differently as Hiranyagarbha or Vairaj. Now after this is about the position of sun god, or what is the active. Now the activities of sun god are described in the next verse, where it's mentioned in the 45th verse. Sun god and the sun planet divide all the directions of the universe. So basically, whatever distinctions we see about the different planetary systems, we talk about the higher planetary systems, where there's a better facility of life, or the Swarga Loka and the other planetary systems that are there. We also speak about the lower planetary systems, where it's meant for suffering. And we also speak about the places meant for enjoyment, or the Tapobhumi that is there. So here it's mentioned, it is also only because of the sun that we can understand which places are for material enjoyment, which are for liberation, which are hellish and subterranean. Basically, it is the one who is doing that activity job of dividing all the planets of the universe. And because of the sun, because of the positioning of the sun, or how it divides the entire universe, we can understand which planets are placed where. Or we can understand which are the planets which are meant for enjoyment, basically which are located above the sun, those planets. And then there are subterranean planets. There are planets higher above the sun which are for liberation, like the Janaloka, Mahaloka, and so on and so forth. So these are one of the few functions of the sun, that how it divides all the planets of the universe. And finally, the 46th verse talks about some of the glories of the sun god, that how the universe, or how all the living entities are dependent on the sun. So this verse talks about Devatiryan Manushyana Sarisripa Saviruddham. Deva is demigods, Tiryak the lower animals, Manushyanam the human beings, Sarisripa the insects, especially Sripa means serpents, and Saviruddham, that is the plants and the trees. Sarva Jiva Nikaya Nam. So it's mentioned all these living entities that are there, be it the demigods that are there, the human beings, the animals, birds, reptiles, everyone. Sarva Jiva Nikaya Nam Surya Atma Drigishwara. So the point that is mentioned is all these living entities, they depend on the sun. And as we understand in this universe, because this entire place is dark, and we know that because of the covering of the universe, or the shells of the universe that are there, there is no light that is there inside. Outside this, there is the Brahmajyoti and then the Vaikuntha planets, which are self-illuminating. But because inside the shell of the universe, there is complete darkness, and that is why sun god plays a very, very prominent role. And that is what is given here, that everyone depends on him for the heat and light given by the sun god. Because here, if there is no sun god, there can be no light and no capacity to see, or no capacity to observe things around. In the Vaikuntha planets, in the spiritual planets, everything is self-illuminating. And it's mentioned there is no need of sun god, there is no need of sun or moon as such. Because as we say, na tad bhasete suro, na shashanko na pavaka, yad gatvana nivartante, tad dhama paramamma. And Prabhupada writes, there is no need of sun, moon, electricity, and anything in the spiritual planets. Because those are self-illuminating. But here in this planet, sun god becomes very, very important. Its role becomes very, very useful. Because everyone depends on him for the heat and light that they get. And then it's mentioned, it is because of the sun's presence that all living entities can see, and therefore another name that is given to him is Drig Ishwara. Drig means eyes, and Ishwara is the personality of Godhead. Because without the presence of the sun, no one can see. And that's why he's given the name of Drig Ishwara, the personality of Godhead presiding over sight. Now here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He says, in this regard, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Surya Atma Atmat Veno Pashya. So here he is also glorifying the position of the sun, and he says, the actual life and soul of all living entities within this universe is the sun. As we discussed already, because the entire place is in darkness, and it's because of the sun that people get the heat and light, or that acts as the actual life and soul of the universe. He is therefore upasaya, worshipable. And then he says, we worship the sun god by chanting the Gayatri mantra. Surya is the life and soul of the universe, and there are innumerable universes for which a sun god is the life and soul. So it's mentioned not just in these universes, all the universes in the material world, or all the universes that are existing at different positions in this material world, sun god acts as the life and soul. And it is because of the presence of the sun god that the planet becomes, or the universe becomes, illuminated. Till the time the sun is there, or the sun is rising in the sky. But now Prabhupada speaks about another point. He sees, just like the sun is the life and soul of the universe, and then he sees, just as the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the life and soul of the entire creation. So in the universe, when we talk of the universe, we can say the sun god is the life and soul, because without it a person cannot see. A person cannot get heat and light, person cannot get the basic things that are necessary. But when we talk of the entire creation, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the life and soul of the entire creation. Be it the spiritual world, be it the material world. And even when it comes to the sun god, the light it gets, ultimately everything is explained as a reflection of the light of the Supreme Lord. And that is why the life and soul of the entire creation is the Supreme Lord. So even when it comes to chanting this Gayatri mantra, of course, people chant, in general, many people chant this Gayatri mantra and they worship the sun god. But when we chant this Gayatri mantra, we understand, or we worship the Supreme Lord who has empowered the sun god for doing these activities. Or ultimately for us, with all the Gayatri mantras, we worship or we remember the Supreme Lord, or we remember the position of the Supreme Lord. And as that famous shloka says, Krishna Surya Sama Maya hai andhakar, Jahan Krishna tahan nahi Maya radhikar. So basically we compare, or the importance is, for us the presence of sun is or the presence of the Lord is like the presence of the sun. As we say that wherever the sun is not there, naturally darkness covers that place, or as soon as the sun sets, all the thieves and rogues come out of the place and darkness is created in that place. Same way, wherever there is the presence of the Lord, or wherever there is a recitation, chanting of the holy names, or all spiritual activities, there darkness or there Maya cannot reside, or the illusory energy of the Lord cannot act in that place. And that is what this shloka says, Krishna Surya Sama Maya Aya Andhakar. And wherever there is no presence of Krishna, there the illusionary energy of the Lord covers all the living entities. Same way as where there is darkness, all the thieves and rogues will become more active. Same way where there is no, or where the presence of the Lord is not there, the illusory energy overpowers all the living entities. Even this analogy can be extended to the presence of a king in a place. As we were discussing previously also on the aspect of kings who used to be in the past, who used to maintain law and order in the past. We see the reign of Prithu Maharaj, who maintained the law and order, who followed the Varnashrama principles. And all the citizens in his time were happy. But before that, when King Vena was there, who was himself a very, very downtrodden personality, and who was not at all following the Varnashrama dharma and always creating problems from the Brahmanas, that time naturally the thieves and the rogues, they all became active. Or naturally, those low-class personalities became active at the time when King Veena was ruling. So same way that analogy can be extended for the king, for the presence of the sun, and same way where the Lord is present, naturally the effect of the material energy reduces. And that is what is mentioned here, is that Supreme Lord is actually the life and soul of the entire creation. And here when the sun god is called as Drigeshwara, or the supreme deity or the deity of the sight. So again, as we understand, ultimately all that the power it gets is also the sun also gets its power of light and heat from the Supreme Lord. As the famous verse from the Brahma Samhita, Yat Chakshuresha Savita Sakala Grahana Raja Samasta Suramurti Ashesha Teja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Samrita Kala Chakro Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Where it speaks about, there also the same thing is mentioned about that how the sun god is like the Chakshu. Yat Chakshuresha Savita Sakala Grahana. When sun god is the eye of the entire planet, or because of the presence of the sun god, everyone is able to see. And then it's mentioned Raja Samasta Suramurtir Ashesha Teja. That he is also like the Raja, or he is the king of the all planets, because he is the one who is providing the light. And Ashesha Teja, it has infinite effulgence that is there, innumerable or abundant effulgence that is there. But then it's mentioned Yasya Gaya Brahmati Samrita Kala Chakra. That the same God is also mounting on the wheel of time, also making the suns, or also rising and also setting, making the day and night on the order of one Supreme Personality. And that is Govinda Madi Purusham Tamham Bhajam. That whatever activities even the sun god is doing, it is not independent. Even those activities are performed by the order of the Supreme Lord, or under the will of the Supreme Lord, under the desire of the Supreme Lord, these activities are being performed. And the Bhagavatam talks about a very amazing shloka, that how by the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun, a person's life diminishes. And that also happens according to the order of the Lord. That shloka says, Ayur harati vai pumsan udyan astan chayan nasau dasyarte yatshano nita uttam shloka varte. Where it speaks, Ayur harati vai pumsan udyan astan chayan nasau. Udyan means by the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone. Ayur harati takes away the life of everyone. Just like we say, as every day passes or as every night comes, a person's time is lost, or his duration of life, the lifespan is reduced every single day. Except for some personalities, or except for tasyarte yashano nita uttam shloka varte. So in general we say, or as Prabhupada explains, that the time and tide waits for no one. For every person, every day when the sun rises and the sun sets, his duration is getting reduced and he is losing his time. Especially he writes for those who are materially engaged in so many topics, discussing so many material things, not at all interested in worship of the Supreme Lord, or not at all interested in spiritual life. With every rising and setting of the sun, they are just losing their life. And this is one of the features of the sun. Sun acts in the form of time and takes away the life of the person. But then he also says there are few people who are free from this effect. Or there are some people who do not lose their time even with the rising and setting of the sun. So he says, Prabhupada says, the Lord is the complete spirit whole, and his name, form, quality, pastimes, entourage, and personality are all identical with him. So a person who comes into contact with any of the above mentioned energies of the Lord, through the proper channel of devotional service, the door to perfection is immediately opened. So there he explains that even though for everyone the sun is taking away the life, but for a person who comes in contact with devotional service, or comes in contact with any of the elements related to the Supreme Lord, his name, form, quality, pastimes, any person who comes in contact with this, for him, even though the time is passing, even for him, but still he progresses towards eternal life. Or for him, the door to perfection opens. And the Bhagavad Gita also says, Swalpam api asya dharmasya trayate mahato bhaya. That even a little devotional service or even a person comes in contact with devotional service, then he is saved from the greatest danger. So for such a person, the sun does not have that effect. For other people, they are losing their life in material things and material engagements. But for a person who turns his face towards the Lord or who starts engaging in devotional service, then the sun's effect change on him. But then for that person, he progresses towards eternal life. And Prabhupada gives a very nice example here. He says, as a highly potent drug injected intravenously acts as once on the whole body, the transcendental topics of the Lord injected through the ear by the pure devotee of the Lord can act very efficiently. So he speaks about those people who understand this and who start practicing spiritual life. For them, the message of the Lord acts like the injection. So just like we see the intravenous injection, as soon as it is put in the person, if a person is having high fever or whatever, but as soon as the injection is put in the person or injection is injected to the person feels relieved. Or immediately the person experiences some relief from the problem or from whatever disease is going through. And same way, Prabhupada here compares the transcendental topics of the Lord to that same injection. And this injection is received through the ears. So he says transcendental topics of the Lord injected through the ear can act very efficiently. So for such a person, then the effect of the time or then the effect of the passing of the rising and setting of the sun, although he also loses his duration of life, but then because he starts progressing towards eternal life, the effect is not the same. And he says that even though, or Prabhupada writes in the last part of that purport, he says, a devotee of the Lord is guaranteed eternal life. A devotee's old age or disease in the present life is but an impetus to such guaranteed eternal life. That for such a person who starts practicing devotional service, even though he also becomes old or he also undergoes diseases, but for such a person, that also acts as an impetus to his eternal life. Why impetus? Because he has already cultivated devotional service throughout his life, and he just increases even in the old age, even in the disease condition. He keeps on it, or he feels it as a more of a motivation or enthusiasm to practice bhakti or practice spiritual life even more seriously. So for such a person, he progresses towards eternal life, and he is not for him. It's mentioned the sun fails to rob the pure devotee of his duration of life. Even though that same sun god robs everyone of his duration of life, but for a pure devotee, the sun fails to rob the pure devotee of his duration of life. And then he says, in as much as he is constantly busy in the devotional service of the Lord, purifying his existence. So the more a person engages in devotional service, the more a person is connected to devotional service and constantly engaged in devotional service. That's what the point Prabhupada mentions. As much as he is constantly busy in the devotional service of the Lord, then the sun fails to rob the pure devotee of his duration of life. Or then the sun does not have any effect on his duration of life. So that is the point that is mentioned about the sun. Then here further Prabhupada writes in this purport, we have information that Vairaj Hiranyagarbha entered the great dull material globe called the sun. So this is what we were discussing, that how the sun god enters the dead universe. And Vairaj or Hiranyagarbha is basically the name given to the sun god, that how he entered the great dull material globe. And here Prabhupada refutes one scientific theory. He says this indicates that the theory held by so-called scientists that no one lives there is wrong. And then he gives multiple aspects on this. Because generally the argument that is given is the temperature itself is so high that in the summer we also feel the temperature so high. Though this argument that is, how can someone live on the sun god? Even to go near the sun god, it's described as someone goes near the sun god, he'll get burnt or he cannot approach the sun god. Then how is it possible for someone to survive on the sun god? So this is the argument that is given by scientists, and here Prabhupada is refuting that argument through multiple points. One of the points he gave in the Bhagavad Gita itself, that how even though our body might not be suitable for residing in the sun god, but soul itself can never be burnt. That shloka from the Gita, Nainam Chindanti Shastrani, Nainam Dahati Pavaka. Nainam Dahati Pavaka, that the soul cannot be burnt. And that's why he says that even though the body, our body is not suitable for sun god, doesn't mean that no one can live on the sun god. Like Prabhupada used to give the example of the aquatics. That even though we are not fit for living in the water, or we cannot survive in the water body, but then there are aquatics, there are fishes, there are reptiles, and so many beings which can survive in the water body. And same way here, Prabhupada proves that how life can exist even on the sun. Of course, the body may be different from us. Their body may be fiery body, or the major element may be fiery in their body. But then we cannot say that life does not exist on the sun. He quotes another example here. He talks about that how Krishna gave the knowledge of the Gita to sun god. Imam vivashvate yogan proktohan aham avyaya. So he gave the knowledge to Vivaswan or Vairaja, he is another name of sun god. So Prabhupada says that when he has given the knowledge to someone, that means life is there, otherwise whom will he give knowledge? So here in different ways, Prabhupada proves this aspect of, or refutes that scientific theory that life does not exist on the sun. So he says, this indicates that the theory held by so-called scientists that no one lives there is wrong. Bhagavad Gita also says that Krishna first instructed Bhagavad Gita to the sun god. So in the Bhagavad Gita only it's mentioned that Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, or basically he spoke the same Bhagavad Gita which he spoke to Arjuna. Millions of years ago he spoke the same Gita to sun god. Therefore the sun is not vacant. It is inhabited by living entities and the predominating deity is Vairaja or Vivaswan. The difference between the sun and the earth is that the sun is a fiery planet, but everywhere it has a suitable body and can live there without difficulty. So of course the temperature is different, the atmosphere is different, that is accepted. But then as Prabhupada clearly says, everyone there has a fiery body. Just like in the aquatics, everyone needs to have a same kind of or a similar kind of body to adjust in that atmosphere or adjust in the water body. Same way on the sun also, the body may be a fiery body, major element will be fire. But for those people, they can live without any difficulty. They do not feel any difficulty or they do not feel the heat there, for their body is used to that atmosphere. And that is how he is proving that how life can exist on the sun. So we'll discuss some of the prayers, or we'll discuss one of the prayers that was offered in Rudra Geet by Lord Shiva, and he is also praying to the sun god. We know the pastime that how the Prachetas, when they were going and they met Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva taught them the Rudra Geet. And it's described that one of the prayers in that Rudra Geet was a prayer to the sun god. So this was Canto 4, chapter 24, verse number 36. Where Lord Shiva is teaching the Prachetas the prayers to offer, pure devotional prayers, and one of the prayers he is offering to the sun god. So here he says, Namo Namo Niruddhaya Hrishikendriyatmane Hrishikeshendriyatmane Namaha Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nibratatmane. So here he is saying, my Lord, as the supreme directing deity known as Aniruddha, you are the master of the senses and the mind. I therefore offer my obeisances unto you again and again. You are known as Ananta as well as Sankarshan because of your ability to destroy the whole creation by the blazing fire from your mouth. Of course, here in the translation, sun god is not mentioned. But then Prabhupada explains in the purport. So this is one of the commentaries by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, where he is saying that this prayer is actually offered to sun god, who is referring to in Aniruddha. It's the expansion of Aniruddha, who is the sun god, and this prayer is being offered to him. So we'll read some part of the purport. Maybe someone can read the purport.
The mind is the director of the senses, and the Lord Aniruddha is the director of the mind. In order to execute the devotional service, one has to fix his mind on the lotus feet of Krishna. Therefore, Lord Shiva prays to the controller of the mind, Lord Aniruddha, be pleased to help him engage in his mind on the lotus feet of the Lord. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita 9:34. Manmanabhava madbhaktu madhyaji mam namaskuru. The mind has to be engaged in meditation on the lotus feet of Lord in order to execute devotional service. It is also stated in Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Matta spiritirjnanam apohanam. From the Lord comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Thus, if Lord Aniruddha is pleased, he can help the mind engage in service of the Lord.
Yeah. So the first two lines in this verse are Namo Namo Aniruddhaya Rishi Kendriya Yatmane, where it's mentioned that Aniruddha, he is the director of the mind, whose mind naturally is the director of the senses. And Aniruddha, we know, is the deity of the mind. So he's praying to Aniruddha to help him control the mind and senses. But now he'll explain that how this prays actually to the sun god. Yeah, thank you.
Thus, if Lord Aniruddha is pleased, he can help the mind engage in service of the Lord. It is also indicated in this verse that Lord Aniruddha is the sun god by virtue of his expansions. Since the Lord predominating deity of the sun is an expansion of the Lord Aniruddha, Lord Shiva also prays to the sun god in this verse. Lord Krishna, by his quadruple expansion, Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, is the Lord of music action, namely thinking, feeling, willing, and acting. Lord Shiva prays to Lord Aniruddha as the sun god, who is the controlling deity of the external material events which constitute the construction of material body.
Yeah. So here it's mentioned that one thing is he's praying to Aniruddha, who is the master of the mind, and he's also praying to sun god, who is nothing but an expansion of Aniruddha. And now here it's explained, or how Prabhupada explains in the purport, quoting from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that how it's the sun god who is being referred to as Paramhamsaya and Nibratatmani. So here he speaks, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the word Paramahamsa is also another name for the sun god, because he says Nama Paramhamsaya. The sun god is addressed herein as Nibratatmane, which indicates that he always maintains the various planets by manipulating the rainfall. So Nibratatmane means one who maintains, or one who takes care of those who are dependent on him. And here Lord Shiva is offering prayer to the sun god because he is also Nibratatmane, or how he maintains by manipulating the rainfall. So it's mentioned the sun god evaporates water from the seas and oceans and then forms the waters into cloud and distributes it over land. When there is sufficient rainfall, grains are produced, and these grains maintain living entities in each and every planet. And that's why here some of the glories of sun god, we see that how he's being prayed as Nibratatmane, or the maintainer of the living entities. Of course, we understand, we have discussed previously, that how he also gets the power of maintenance from the Supreme Lord. But here his role is, he's the one who creates or who causes sufficient rainfall. Because of the rains, grains grow, and that's how the living entities subsist. That's what the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, Annad Bhavanti Bhutani, Parjanyad Anya Sambhava, Annad Bhavanti Parjanyo, Yagya Karma Samudvava. That ultimately that rains come by the doing of yagyas, then the rains come and then the grains grow, which people are able to eat. And that happens by the mercy of sun god. That's why he's mentioned as Nibratatma. Then it's mentioned the sun god is also addressed herein as Purna, or complete, because the rain emanating from the sun have no end. For millions and millions of years since the creation of this universe, the sun god has been supplying heat and light without diminution. So another name or another thing that is mentioned is Nama Paramahamsaya Purnaya Nibratatmane. Three words are used: Paramhamsa, Nibratatmane, and Purnaya. And these words are explained that these are used for the sun god. We discussed Nibratatmane because he acts as a maintainer. How through him, because of him, the rains happen and the grains grow, and so he maintains the living entities. Now it's explained why he is called as Purnaya or Purna. So that is mentioned because he keeps on emanating the rays from his body, but we did not see the rains or the rays diminishing as such. As it's mentioned that from millions of years since the universe has been existing, the sun god has been giving out the rays. And it's not that sun gives rays only in the day and not in the night. When it comes to sun himself, it keeps on giving rays throughout. For us, we experience the day because the sun is in the northern, in 6 months he's in the northern hemisphere and 6 months in the southern hemisphere. So we experience day and night, but the sun continuously keeps on giving out its rays. And that's why it's mentioned it is Purna. Of course, this Purna doesn't mean that he doesn't get annihilated ever. He also has a limited lifetime, but still in that capacity he's mentioned as Purna. Because he keeps on giving his rays for millions and millions of years without diminishing his capacity. But as we all understand, the real or the supreme Purna is the Supreme Lord. As the Ishopanishad also says, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. That ultimately this definition of Purna fits on the Supreme Lord, because he creates so many universes, he creates so many material things or material entities and also the spiritual world. But he doesn't diminish in his identity, or he doesn't get reduced because of that. He always remains Purna in all that thing. But here, for the sun's capacity to give light, heat and light for such a long time, he is also being addressed as Purna. And then the third word is explained, that is Paramhamsa. That why the sun god is called as Paramhamsa. Because Paramhamsa generally we see for a great devotee. So here it's mentioned, the word Paramhamsa is applied to persons who are completely cleansed. When there is sufficient sunshine, the mind remains clear and transparent. In other words, the sun god helps the mind of the living entity to become situated on the platform of Paramhamsa. Now, this we see is a very subtle thing. As it's mentioned, Paramhamsa means one who is completely cleansed. And here it's mentioned, when there is sufficient sunshine or when there is sufficient light, the mind naturally becomes clear and transparent. And that's why he's called as Paramhamsa. And this is the effect that is generally seen when light is there or when the sun is shining bright. Naturally, that mind becomes little clear and transparent. And when the light is dim and the entire atmosphere appears gloomy. Even when we talk about the description of the three modes of material nature, we talk about the mode of goodness, we talk about mode of passion and mode of ignorance. So there also this thing we see is where there is bright or the light is there, naturally that place comes in the mode of goodness. And ignorance means a gloomy place or a place not completely covered with darkness, that place naturally becomes ignorant. So here the same point is mentioned, that how, because of the sufficient sunshine, the mind remains clear and transparent. And this is one of the Prabhupada pastimes when he went to UK and when he went to London. And because there was no sunshine there, and Prabhupada was asked this question, that something related to hell. And Prabhupada said, this is hell, or London is hell because there is no sunlight here. So the same point is mentioned, because without sunlight, naturally the people go low or the mind becomes more and more hazy. And symptoms of depression and so many other things are seen just without the presence of sunlight. But with the presence of sunlight, the mind remains clear and transparent. And that's why the sun god is addressed here as Paramhamsa. Then it's mentioned, thus Lord Shiva placed to Aniruddha to be kind upon him, so that his mind will always be in the perfect state of cleanliness and will be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Just as fire sterilizes all unclean things, the sun god also keeps everything sterilized, especially dirty things within the mind, thus enabling one to attain elevation to the platform of spiritual understanding. So this is how the importance of the sun god in the life of a person is mentioned, or especially in the life of a devotee. That naturally all the dirty things within the mind become sterilized just by the presence of sun god. And of course we understand sun itself is not affected by this. Like in Ishopanishad at one place, Prabhupada gives the example of how it sterilizes all the stool and urine that is there. The sunlight is everywhere and so many places are dirty, and it evaporates and it sterilizes all that place. But then the sun itself doesn't become contaminated. Same way, here it's mentioned that all the unclean things, when the sunlight falls on them, those places, those areas become completely clean. And that way, it enables one to attain elevation to the platform of spiritual understanding. And that's why here Lord Shiva is praying to Aniruddha, that his mind will always be engaged in the perfect state of cleanliness and will be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. So this is how we see that sun god becomes important even in the life of a sadhaka, that how it removes the dirty things within the mind and help him elevate himself to the platform of spiritual understanding. And that's why this is one of the prayers which Lord Shiva is offering to Aniruddha, who is the deity of the mind, but which is also a prayer being offered to the sun god. And here the glories of the sun god are mentioned. Now we see about when it comes to sunlight or when it comes to the example of the sun, we see even in the Bhagavatam or even in so many different places, many philosophical aspects are explained through the example of sun. We'll see it often, even in the Bhagavad Gita, if we see in the Bhagavatam, we see in many places, Prabhupada will give some or the other example related to the sun to explain some concepts of our philosophy. And today we'll try to discuss some of the aspects which Prabhupada compares or he gives the example of sun to explain the philosophy or explain different aspects to clarify different aspects of a philosophy. So one thing he does is Prabhupada used the example of sun to defeat the impersonalist philosophy. So here he explains in one of the verses, certain conditioned souls put forward the theory that Supreme Brahman or the personality of Godhead is overcome by illusion or Maya. And at the same time, they maintain that he is unconditioned. This is against all logic. So this we see generally the Mayavadis give such kind of interpretation that when we talk of incarnations, they don't accept that the incarnation is the Lord himself. They say that incarnation is the transformation of Brahman in the mode of goodness. When Brahman incarnate or transforms in the mode of passion, human beings come. And then he says the incarnation in different modes, they say. And they say the incarnation in the mode of, or transformation in the mode of goodness, that is the Supreme Lord. That's how incarnations happen. So now Prabhupada defeats this philosophy through the example of the sun. Or Prabhupada quotes the example given by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jiva Goswami, where how he explains that energy of the Lord cannot affect the Lord. So he say that although the sun is all light, the clouds, darkness and snowfall are all parts and parcel of the sun. So even though the sun is all light, but it's because of the sun all these three things are observed. Clouds are observed, or clouds come in the air because of the presence of the sun, because sun evaporates the water. And same way darkness and snowfall also happens because of the absence of the sun. But without the sun, there cannot be any concept of darkness or snow. So he says, without the sun, there is no possibility of the sky being overcast with cloud or darkness, nor can there be snowfall on the earth. Then he says, although life is sustained by the sun, life is also disturbed by darkness and snowfall produced by the sun. So now he'll come to the comparison of this. First he's explaining about the sun, that although it's because of the presence of the sun, that's what we have been discussing, how life sustains through the presence of the sun. But because of the clouds and darkness, life is disturbed. When the rains come, the life gets disturbed. Because of darkness or because of snowfall, so many things get disturbed. So it's mentioned that life is sustained by the sun, but also by the same entities produced by the sun, life is also disturbed. And then he says, but it is also a fact that the sun itself is never overcome by darkness, clouds or snowfall. The sun is far, far away from such disturbances. Now clouds, darkness, snowfall, everything is produced because of the sun, but sun is not affected by all this. And same way he says, similarly the Supreme Brahman or the Para Brahman is always unaffected by the influence of the material energy, although it is one of his energies. Parasya Shaktir Vivideva Shruyate. So when people say that the Lord has come under influence or Lord himself has come under Maya, or they say that he is the incarnation, one of the philosophies is that Supreme or the Brahman transforms in the mode of goodness, and that is the incarnation. Another explanation is given that Lord himself has become overcome by Maya or illusory energy. Here Prabhupada is defeating that through the example of the sun. He's saying that sun is the one who is causing clouds, who is causing darkness, who is causing snowfall. But we don't see the sun getting covered by all that. Although our vision may be covered, when the clouds are overcast or over in the sky, we won't be able to see the sun. There is another example of that is given in when we talk of offenses during chanting. They are also, the anarthas in the chanting are also compared to the clouds. So again, the comparison that is given is our vision is covered, but sun cannot be covered by the clouds. Or sun will always be there, but our vision for temporary, because of our anarthas, that will be covered by the clouds. And same way he's giving this example for the Supreme Lord. Same way the Lord cannot be affected by the influence of the material energy. It's his own energy. We might not be able to perceive the presence of the Lord because we are covered by the illusory energy. But that doesn't mean that the Lord gets covered by it. And he further says that the clouds, darkness and snowfall can cover only a very insignificant portion of the sun's rays. So cloud and darkness and snowfall cannot cover the entire sun. Only an insignificant portion of the sun's rays can be covered. And in this entire analogy, the living entities are compared to the sun's rays. So because we are infinitesimal, we are very, very small, we are covered by the modes of material nature. But that doesn't mean that the Lord himself can be covered. We are the marginal energy, we are the Tatastha Shakti, but Lord is the Purushottam, or Lord is the supreme energy. He cannot be covered by all these things. And that's what it's mentioned. Living entities are like the sun's rays. They get covered by the cloud, they get covered by the darkness, but the Lord himself is not covered. Just like sun himself or sun itself is not covered by these things. There is no qualitative difference between the sun and its rays. The sun's rays are sometimes overpowered by another energy of the sun, namely by clouds or by snowfall. So here Prabhupada used this example of the sun to defeat the impersonalist philosophy. He says even though these are produced from the sun, the clouds, snowfall, everything is produced by the sun, but sun is never covered by them. Same way, the living entities, even though the material mode or the material modes of nature or the material energy is produced by the Supreme Lord, living entity like sun rays can be covered by it, but the Lord himself is never covered by it. So this way he uses this example to defeat the impersonalist philosophy, that those who say that Lord is covered by the Maya or Lord is covered by illusion. He uses another example, and that he uses of sun itself to explain the Achinta Bheda Ved Tattva. So what is that example? Anyone knows? Very famous example Prabhupada often quotes to explain the simultaneous one and difference of the Lord.
The sun rays and sun are same only, but they're different.
Correct. He explains about the sun god, the sun planet, the sun rays, and the sunlight, basically the sunlight. And he says that although all three are identical, like we give the example in our FOE sessions also, when the sunlight comes, we say sun has come. So although it is identical, yet it is different. Sunlight can be also called as a sun, but we still know that sun is somewhere different, and sun god is another personality altogether. And then he explains this is the meaning of simultaneously one and different, or the Achinta Bheda Vedta. Another thing he explains, all the planets rest on the sunshine. And because of the heat of the sun, they all revolve in their orbits. Now, even when it comes to these planets, they are revolving in their orbits. The Bhagavatam explains that is also because of the sunshine. So in that sense, he says, being the rays of the sun, the sunshine is non-different. Similarly, all the planets resting on the sunshine are non-different from the sun. Means we can just extend that analogy like that, or that is what Prabhupada explains, that someone can say even the planets are non-different from the sun, because they are revolving in the sun rays of the sun. The entire material world is completely dependent on the sun, being produced by the sun, and the cause the sun is inherent in the effects. Now he is trying to explain the Achinta Abhed Tattva through the example of the sun. That someone can say that even the sunlight is non-different from the sun. Someone can even say the entire planets are evolving because of the sunlight, so they are also non-different from the sun. So in one sense, everything is the sun. But when we see in another level, we see that, okay, sun is different, sun god is different, sunlight is different, and planets also are different. Same way he says, Krishna is the cause of all causes, and the effects are permeated by the original cause. So Krishna, in one sense, we see the entire creation is the Lord himself. or idam hi vishwan bhagwan ivetara, that everything that exists in this creation is the energy of is actually the Supreme Lord. But how? Because it is an energy of the Supreme Lord. And same way, even though everything can be said as the sun because everything is resting on the sunlight, but at the same time, it's different from the sun. It has a different identity from the sun. So Prabhupada uses in many places, he used the analogy of the sun just to explain different aspects of the philosophy. In Ishopanishad, there is a verse which explains the identity of the Lord. It says the Lord is Shuddham and Apapaviddham. Shuddham means Lord is all pure. And Apapaviddham means any sin cannot touch the Lord. Lord is the one, or because of the Lord, or when the people commit some sinful activities, don't follow the Vedic scriptures, they get sinful activities. But Lord himself is above all those rules, regulations. Or Lord himself does not get any kind of sin. So now Prabhupada explains this nature of the Lord being Shuddham through the example of the sun again. He says, he is Shuddham, most purified, and he is often compared to the sun. The sun extracts moisture from many untouchable places on the earth, yet it remains completely pure. In fact, it purifies obnoxious things by virtue of its sterilizing power. If the sun, which is a material object, is so powerful, then we can hardly begin to imagine the purifying strength of the all-powerful Lord. So here again, the comparison to the sun is given that just like the sun sterilizes so many dirty things, so many obnoxious things, just by the sun rays it gets sterilized or that becomes clean. So Prabhupada is saying if the sun can have so much power, which is just a material object, then how much purifying power the Lord can have? Or when we say when someone practices devotional service, he is getting purified. Ultimately, every purification, everything can happen only by the mercy of the Lord. Basically, by the presence of the Lord, or when he is able to invoke the presence of Lord in his life, as again the same shloka, Krishna Surya Sama Maya and Andhakar, that the more he is able to invoke the presence of the Lord in his life, the more purification will happen. Because even if a material object like sun can do so much purification, in one day it can do, and that too we see within a few hours when the sunlight comes, so many things are purified. Then why can't the Lord, which is much more powerful, do the purification or do the purification of the living entities? So that's how the sun or the Lord is compared to the sun. There is one more analogy Prabhupada gives, and here he explains. Again, he talks about the sun. And here he proves another philosophical point. He explains that how the Gyanis who are there, we know there are different kinds of transcendentalists. When it comes to karmis, they are not considered transcendentalists. They are just aiming for material gains. But then the Gyanis, the yogis are also considered to be transcendentalists because they are aiming for a higher perfection or they are aiming for liberation. So Prabhupada gives the analogy of the sun to explain that why these Gyanis are never attracted to the Lord. Even though they are also on a transcendental path, they are also doing some transcendental activities. But then why they are not attracted to the devotional service of the Lord? So Prabhupada explains this example. He says, the eyes and the sun are very intimately related because without sunlight, the eyes are unable to see. This we all know that because without the presence of the sunlight, the eyes cannot see. But then he says, this is very important. He says, but the other parts of the body being attached to the sun as a source of warmth take more advantage of the sun than do the eyes. Because for the eyes, it's like an instrument. When the sunlight is there, we are able to see. But for other parts of the body, they have no such need of seeing. But they utilize the sunlight in the form of the warmth given to the body or the vitamins that gets produced in the body because of the sunlight. So then he says, without possessing affection for the sun, the eyes cannot bear the rays of the sun. Or such eyes have no capacity to understand the utility of the sun's rays. So little difficult to understand, but what he's saying is, if the eyes have no affection for the sun, or basically if the eyes only use the sun as an instrument to see, so then the eyes can never understand the importance of the sun or cannot understand the utility of the sun's rays who are there. And now he'll speak about something very interesting. He'll speak, similarly, the empiric philosophers, despite their theoretical knowledge of Brahman, cannot utilize the mercy of the Supreme Brahman because they lack affection. So just like the eye may have knowledge, or eye will be able to see so many things, but until it has affection for the sun, it cannot understand the importance of the sun. Whereas the body part, they are able to utilize the warmth of the sun for so many other purposes for nourishing the body. Same way they say that just like that, these philosophers who are there, Gyanis who are there, they theoretically know everything about Brahman, they speak so much about Brahman, they do so much philosophical analysis about Brahman, but they cannot utilize the mercy of the Lord, or they cannot get that mercy of the Lord because they lack affection. And it says, these people, although they indulge in theoretical knowledge of Brahman, they do not develop affection for Brahman, nor do they have any scope for development of affection because of their defective method. So he's giving that example of eyes and sun to understand the Gyanis thing, that how Gyanis are not attracted, because Gyanis don't have any affection basically. They are following a completely dry path. They are not depending on the mercy of the Lord, and that's why they are not able to understand the Lord basically, or they do not develop any affection for the Lord. And now, of course, the example was compared to the eyes, just like the eyes. If just eyes use the sun as an instrument to see, but doesn't understand the importance of the sun rays, so the eyes can also not develop affection for the sun. In same way, the Gyanis do not develop affection for the Supreme Lord. And finally, Prabhupada concludes by saying, a devotee of the sun god, even though devoid of eyesight, can see the sun god as he is from this planet, whereas one who is not a devotee of sun cannot even bear the glaring sunlight. So for people in general who have no affection to the sun, who are not devoted to the sun, when the sunlight is very high, no one is able to watch the sun. Or when the sunlight, if someone tries to see the sun, he cannot. But a person who doesn't have eyesight also, but if he becomes a devotee of the sun god, then he can see the sun, or he can see the presence of the sun even from this planet. So he's explaining the importance of devotion basically, that how through the devotion or through the mercy of the Lord we can understand the Lord, not by our own endeavors. Just like a person, even without eyesight, he can see the sun god. But even a person who has eyes cannot see the glaring effulgence of the sun. Same way he says, by devotional service, even though one is not on the level of a Jnani, one can see the personality of Godhead within himself due to his development of pure love. So by devotion, a person can understand the Lord, not by any other process of Jnana Yoga or Karma Yoga or whatever. So again, he gives the example of sun, which is a little complex here. But the point he explains is, just like a person who is devoted to sun god, even without eyesight, he can see the sun god. Same way, a person who is devoted to the Supreme Lord can understand the Supreme Lord, even though he might not be very, very great philosopher as such. So here we see in many different pastimes or many different examples that how the sun god is glorified, and how different aspects are given of the position of the sun god, the importance of the sun god, and how the sun god is very, very important to keep the mind of the devotee clean, intact, or free from dirty, inauspicious things, so that he can make more and more importance or more and more advancement in spiritual life. There's one more pastime which comes about the sun god, where there was one personality who became, or who was not satisfied with the rotation of the sun. Because we know, and of course, what the current science says, that the sun is at the center and the planets are revolving around it. But according to the Bhagavatam, even the sun is rotating. In fact, the next chapter after this is the movement of the sun, where it speaks about that how the sun, for the 6 months, it rotates in the northern hemisphere, or the north side of the Sumeru hill, that is called as Uttarayan. And for 6 months, it rotates on the southern side of the Sumeru hill. So there's one more pastime where there was one personality who was dissatisfied by this. Why he was dissatisfied? Because when the sun is in the northern side, the southern side was not getting any light. And when the sun was in the southern side, the northern side was not getting any light. And this personality decided to illuminate the entire place. Or it decided that where the sun is not there, I will illuminate that place. Who was that personality? That was Priyavat Maharaj. Who was a very, very great devotee who decided to follow the path of the sun. So we know wherever the sun is, the light is there. So he became dissatisfied that wherever the sun is not there, the people are suffering, or they are not getting the light of the sun, they are not getting the nourishment. And he decided to follow the path of the sun. and to create or to give light to those places where sun was not present. So here it's explained by the Prabhupada writes there, by the power of yoga of sages like Priyavrata, or like Saubri and Priyavrata, had two bodies, one as the king and one as the sun. So it's described basically this Priyavat Maharaj was such a great devotee of the Lord and such a powerful entity that he was able to divide himself into two. One was he was the king and another was the sun. And that division, and through that body of the sun, he was going behind the sun god and illuminating all those places which were not getting light because of the presence or because of the absence of the sun. And it's also described how much or how he was giving the light to the planets. It's said that in the May and June where there's scorching heat, Priyavat Maharaj was giving very pleasing sun rays to the people. Or the people generally they get scorching heat, but when Priyavat Maharaj expanded in the form of sun, he was giving very pleasing rays to the people, just like moonlight. And in the months of October and November, where there is very, very cold or the sunlight is very less, that time he was sufficiently giving sunlight to the people so that they can get sufficient heat and light. And this way, Priyavat Maharaj was so powerful that he could make another sun god, or he could also expand himself in the form of sun god. Of course, one more thing that is explained is, we know that sun god is also to some extent a devotee of the Supreme Lord. So here Prabhupada also speaks about why Priyavat Maharaj did like this. Was he envious of the sun god, or did he had some enmity towards the sun god, so he expanded like this? So Prabhupada says, although Maharaj Priyavat devised a very powerful chariot as brilliant as the sun, he had no desire to compete with the sun god. And then he says, for a Vaishnava never wants to supersede another Vaishnava. So he maintains a very important philosophical point here, even though Priyavat Maharaj expanded in the form of a sun. But then he says that this was not because he had some enmity towards the sun god or he wanted to compete with the sun god or something like that. He says the purpose of Priyavat Maharaj was to give abundant benefits in material existence. Or basically, as I was explaining about how he was giving pleasing rays in the months of May and June, and he was giving sufficient warmth in the month of October and November. So his mood was only to help the people who were there. He had no personal intention to compete with the sun god or to supersede the sun god. As Prabhupada explains this very important concept, a Vaishnava never tries to supersede another Vaishnava. We have another example of this in the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, who writes or Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who writes the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita. But at many different places, he doesn't elaborate on many of the pastimes, saying that these pastimes have already been elaborated by Vrindavan Das Thakur in Chaitanya Bhagavat. And there also the same point is mentioned, that how a Vaishnava never tries to supersede another Vaishnava, never tries to compete with another Vaishnava. Rather, he is always concerned about the benefit of the living entities. So a Priyavat Maharaj's mood of expanding in the form of the sun god was to help all the living entities, not to supersede another Vaishnava, or not to supersede the sun god who was there. And finally, there is one more story in this regard, as we discussed about Priyavat Maharaj who became the sun and who illuminated all the planets. There is one more personality who did like that. But then he was demon in the form, or he was demon and he had some other ulterior motives who was there. So this also comes in the Bhagavatam. It's mentioned, this is a story from the Vaman Puran. A demon named Vidyun Mali, a follower of Shiva, pursued the sun on a golden chariot given by Shiva. So this person had received some benediction from Lord Shiva. He had gotten a golden chariot, and he started following the sun god in that golden chariot. Now what happened? Due to the effulgence from the chariot, night disappeared. So here, even he was a demoniac personality. He was not some personality like Priyavat Maharaj, but he had gotten that benediction, and as demons had the nature to use the benedictions for wrong purposes, he started following the sun god and the night itself disappeared. Then it's described the sun became angry and melted the chariot with his heat and made it fall from the sky. So in case of Priyavat Maharaj, we don't see this happening because Priyavat Maharaj had good intentions and he didn't want to supersede another Vaishnava or the sun god. But here, when this personality with this demon started doing the same thing, sun god became angry with him and it melted the entire chariot, or he melted the chariot that was. So here we see multiple aspects we can see from all these pastimes. One is that how sun itself in the universe is a very, very powerful personality, which has numerous roles to play in the entire universe, giving the light, which divides the universe into multiple places, or divides, giving directions to the different places in the universe, which sustains all the living entities, which gives power to see to all the living entities. And basically, how it's described, or in Prabhupada, in one sense, he calls him a Vaishnava also. Or Prabhupada says that even the sun god is a Vaishnava. Of course, we say that he's not a pure devotee as such, but he is also a devotee of the Supreme Lord. And that's why whatever power he gets by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. So that way we understand here that how the Supreme Lord or the sun's presence or the presence of the sun god becomes very, very important for all the living entities. And that's why in the current verse and under discussion, he is also called as Drig Ishvara, the personality of Godhead, or the person who presides over sight. Because without the presence of the sun, a person cannot see materially. And also without the presence of the sun, the person naturally becomes spiritually also blind. Because sun helps in different ways, as we discussed in the purport, how it cleans the mind, how it makes the mind completely transparent, and it helps in spiritual advancement of a person. Whereas without the presence of the sunlight, the mind will block. First of all, the eyes won't be able to see, and the mind of the person will also become hazy. So this way we see how this way we see the importance of the sun god in the universe and what are the different functions it performs in the universe. So we'll end here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.